All right, and we are back for episode 52 of Digital Divination. This
Right.
is officially now 2 years since we started.
Oh, that's right. 52. That's
Yeah.
right. We've done 26 twice.
Yes.
Happy anniversary, John.
Well, thanks. It's if you look at the timing of it, we started right with the pandemic. So this is pretty much just been a pandemic podcast for us.
Right. Well, which doesn't mean we wouldn't be fine to be
Yeah.
recording when there is not a global pandemic, too. That would actually be my preference.
Yes. With the loosening of the COVID protocols, it seems like things are sort of getting back to normal. I notice, some folks are talking about who's going to PaizoCon and all this kind of stuff, and it's like, yeah, I almost worry that we're jumping the gun. It looks really good right now, but I worry about like 2 weeks, 3 weeks from now, when stuff that's happening in Asia and in Europe with the new variant of Omicron, is that going to hit us as well?
Yeah, I know. And I think the CDC just today said it is going to hit us, and we are underfunded in order to address it.
Yeah.
But that's always been. I mean, there has been a lot of lifting of the mask mandates and the vaccine testing. I still see. I was out and about today for a little bit, and still virtually everybody was masked, regardless.
Yeah.
One of the stores I was in, there was like a group of 4 or 5, guys, late teens, maybe early 20s, and none of them were masked. And you could tell just kind of by the relief on their faces, they were like, this was their excursion out to not be masked. And, that's, young people like that, it's a much bigger percentage of their lives that this has impacted.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So
I
I
didn't
feel like
really
that
think
could
about
be.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, I could feel like this could be kind of a big thing. I mean, if you're somebody who's 17 now, was 15 when the pandemic started, and I didn't change a lot between 45 and 47, but I changed a lot from 15 to 17.
Yeah. Well, all the things that happened in high school, the events and everything that got disrupted and or changed, we had to wear masks and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So I can see why a lot of people are probably really hopeful now, especially younger folks, that this is the end.
Yeah, we can hope. We'll see. I know that there is we just heard at Paizo for PaizoCon that PaizoCon will be hybrid. It will be partially in person, and they've been asking people in the office, would you feel comfortable being in person, or would you feel rather be remote?
Mm-hmm.
And I chose remote, not because I'm not comfortable being in person. I actually really like being in person, but it is going to be a masked event, and I just can't with my with my hearing. I have to see people's lips move, especially when I'm in a very, very social setting, like PaizoCon is. So I worry that I'd be running a panel and somebody would want to ask a question, and I wouldn't be able to understand them through their mask halfway across the room. I mean, I have a hard time hearing people anyway. So I said, you know what, just this year it's going to have to be in person, I can't do in person. And I worry that I came off sounding like a jerk in that it was, well, I can't do in person if we're going to have masks. That makes me sound like an anti-masker, and I'm not. But I'll be able to participate remotely, and I'm glad that they're providing for that.
Yeah. So even with the mask mandate being lifted in Washington, there's still going to be masks required there?
That's what they're saying now. And they are, they might be able to lift that. They don't want to be able to say, though, because here's the situation. They can't say it will be masks optional, and then if something happens, say, oh, no, we didn't mean it, put your mask back on, because then people might really regret having chosen to come in person if they wanted to be in. I would regret, because I'm like, oh, so I actually can't be hearing people or understanding them with a lack of hearing. But they can go the other way. They could say it is going to be masked, but then maybe we'll lighten that a little bit. I don't think they will. I think they say, look, we've got to make a decision about how we're going to hold it and what the requirements are going to be. And because people make plans way ahead of time, we can't change that a lot.
Well, a lot of people are excited for coming. So I actually wasn't aware of that part. I just assumed with the mandate lifting that they were going to change that. So hopefully they'll broadcast that out pretty soon for people.
Yeah, they are. I think the plan
Yeah.
is to be able to broadcast that pretty soon. I
Yeah.
don't know, as much as it's personally inconvenient for me, I still think that having masks at a show, a big show like PaizoCon or Gen Con,
Yeah.
is probably a good idea. I had a work colleague tell me about Gen Con in particular. She said
Hmm.
one of the reasons that you're going to get sick going to Gen Con
Yeah.
is that this is a thing people plan all year for. And if 2 days before they come out for it, they've got a little bit of a runny nose and maybe they're running a little bit of a fever, they're not going
Yeah.
to not come. They're just going to come sick.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
so that's why it's kind of a petri dish in a way that something like a
Yeah.
workplace or a school might not be, where somebody feels like, all right, well, if
Right.
I'm sick, I'll stay home. People, if they're sick, they don't stay home from big conventions they've really planned on to look forward to. Cruise ships are very much the same way.
Right. Wow.
So
That's a really good point, and maybe a good reason for me to continue to wear masks all the time, even when we're not in a pandemic, given my
yeah.
immunocompromised state and the fact that I always
Yes.
get sick. I always get sick at cons.
Yeah.
So,
Well, that's why.
oh,
And I'd
yeah,
be lying if I said
yeah,
I wasn't part of the problem. I remember one of the early Gen
yeah,
Cons I went to, and I mean, not only was I excited to go to Gen Con, but I had 3 other guys, and we were all, college
yeah,
poor. That is to say, not
yeah,
actually poor, but just without a lot of ready cash the way you
yeah,
are. And I know that the other 3 guys they needed me to come to help chip in for gas
right,
and
right.
food and the hotel. I mean, if I didn't go, they wouldn't go. They couldn't go either. They couldn't afford to.
Hmm.
So I wasn't letting my friends down as well as myself down. I'm like, oh, well, even though I'm a little sniffly, I better go. So
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
did. So,
Yeah, it's interesting with the masks. The mandate changed here in Washington on Saturday. And then I gave finals on Tuesday and Wednesday, and the students didn't have to wear masks. They're not required to, but still a lot of them did in deference to me because they know my situation.
that's really kind of them.
And I told them they didn't have to, if they're sitting far away from me and everything. But so I thought that was kind of nice. I had to meet with 2 of my doctors this week as well because end of the term I have time for stuff like this. So I scheduled some doctor's appointments, and unfortunately, both of them said I still have to keep wearing masks. I still have to keep avoiding big crowds. Can't eat
Mm,
in restaurants still. They don't think I should teach without wearing a mask with the situation. And they actually both said that probably by mid-April we'll all be masking up again because it's all going to get bad here anyway. But it's
oh,
still,
that's good to hear. I don't have
yeah,
I don't have any specific doctor info
yeah,
about what the expectation is, and now I do. So
yeah.
thank you.
But still, it's like, well, one of them has a friend who's an epidemiologist, and they were talking about it. But and both of them work with immunocompromised patients like myself. Some of them actually a lot older, and so they both have to constantly be on guard and wear masks. And they actually, one of the things that they also recommended was to wear glasses, and that's something that they're all required to do in the medical profession now because I guess you can get COVID that way as well. So
Oh, I mean, your eyes are a mucous membrane,
yeah.
so just like the inside
Yeah,
of your nose.
and that was something that was newer. I had not I kind of heard that was an issue before, but it's the first time somebody recommended to me that that would be something good to do, and it's like, well, okay, I'll see. I'm getting some eye surgery coming up, and maybe I'll have to start wearing glasses anyway. So,
All right. Well, I've got
oh
it covered
yeah,
just because I wear glasses all the time,
right,
regardless. So,
right, yeah, yeah. But it's a lot going on with that. So, what's new in your life here, other than all this COVID stuff?
oh, I've got the Kickstarter that we talked about, Scaldwood
Yeah.
Blight. I'm very excited about that. I'm putting in the last, literally the last 3 pages of edit changes.
Wow.
And then that will be done. And I put done in air quotes because the next step is to prepare a printer proof
Right.
where
Right. Right.
for all the people that are getting print on demand, I don't want it to look junky.
Right.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to print on demand a single copy for myself. Well, 2, one for me, one for Owen. And
Right.
then we can look at it and make sure that the binding is as we expect, that the
Hmm.
placement of the graphics on the spine makes it. This is actually the first time I've done plenty of print on demand books, but this is the first one I've done with a spine. So I'm like, oh,
Right.
that's kind of interesting. And that can take a couple of weeks. Even if I order it as soon as later tonight, it'll be a couple of weeks before it gets printed and shipped out to me, and then I coordinate with Owen about any sort of minor changes we want to make. But it's feeling like early April is still going to be, that's when we're able to just release and everybody gets what they paid for. So it feels like I'm not letting anybody down at that schedule, and I feel really good about it. I think we'd said PDF by the end of April and print on demand by the end of August or something like that. It's a very comfortable buffer. So things are moving quickly, and finishing that up has been quite a lot of fun, actually.
Now, do you do your own layout and everything, and you put all the art in there as well? And
I do, and my brother, who was a professional graphic designer for several years, will be quick to point out, oh yes, look how amateurish this is. It is totally what Ron does. But yeah, I do it myself, and I've got a couple of good programs that let me manipulate graphics and then manipulate the background and do layout. And I think it looks pretty good. It's not anything I would be embarrassed to have on my shelf. So I've got everything is gradually pushing up in quality. Even companies that are kind of small are able to do some exceptionally really good looking things with their layout. And I think that's two reasons to that. First, I feel like the general industry is pushing towards a more professional looking layout. And so anybody who wants to be in the industry feels like they have to. But I also think that there is a real sense that editors and graphic designers and layout specialists are necessary people in this field, and that's not really been the case. It's been one person kind of lays it out themselves and does okay. There are stories of Kevin's last name I'm probably going to butcher, Cymbaleta, the one who does the Palladium products, riffs and things like that, where he will literally type something up, cut it out on white paper, and then glue it to a page, photocopy the page. That was layout then.
Wow.
And up until kind of recently was still layout. So when everybody else had moved on to other things, that was still his preferred layout way.
Yeah, I did some writing back in the day, and that's how we did layout, I will say. So, oh, man. Yeah, that was back in high school, though. High school layout stuff, creative writing and, putting things together. I saw today, actually, I saw a message come across on Discord. Somebody saying, oh, yeah, I'm interviewing Ron Lundeen today. Stop by if you want to ask questions or something. You've been doing quite a few interviews lately. Is that right?
I did. That's actually been kind of fun. That was for Hexgrid Hangout. That was really fun. Don and Carrie asked if I'd be available to hang out, chat with them about some of the things I've done recently. It turns out they're playing Horizons of the Vast, and they're in Planetfall and wanted to talk about Planetfall. And some of the things that they wanted to talk about and pick my brain about are exactly those things that changed in development. So I'm like, that's as much a surprise to me as it is to you. It's kind of fun. They've done things a little bit differently than we have. They started everybody at third level. And the GM has been kind of ramping up the difficulty, which I guess is not impossible, but it does require some work. And the GM made what he is admitting is maybe a mistake of giving them vehicles like right on day one. So they have not had any charter turns, and they've still explored like a quarter of the map. They've been all over to explore stuff because they've got vehicles that can go really fast. I'm like, no, we're plodding along. Our Hortus in particular makes us kind of plod along.
Well, the interesting about that, having read through the first book, it seems like that's really going to short circuit a lot of the things that happen. So he's going to have to add a lot. The GM's going to have to add a lot to kind of beef it up again.
Well, and that's what he said he's done. They're really taking their time with it. He's folding in a lot of sort of home game aspects of it. That's exciting to hear. As much as I like hearing people run what I write, I also like hearing people I customize what I write. That's fun too.
Right. No, I think that would be good. It's I'll admit that I have this mindset from probably society play of running things as they're written and only when there's nothing for context, it doesn't explain, what happens here, then I'll go ahead and kind of go freeform on that. I don't intentionally introduce a lot of stuff from the beginning, and maybe that's something I should look into doing. I don't know.
Well, your players won't know any difference usually.
Right,
I mean, heck, I wrote the adventure. I'm not going to know any different.
Yeah, right.
But we did have a conversation about that. We had a work conversation about that just the other day, where we on the Adventure Path team were talking about how we can set up threads that GMs can use if they want by saying, oh, well, there's a whole basement level under here, but it's outside the scope of the adventure. Or if they decide to go this edge off the map, they might find, maybe there's some, goblin gangs over there or something, but it's outside the scope of this adventure. And the organized play people were, that is not a word, that is not a phrase we can use. There is no outside the scope of the adventure. If it's not given to you in the adventure, you're doing something wrong. If you feel like you need something outside of the page, you are doing something wrong. Turn back before you make a bigger mistake. So,
well, and I think, when I do run APs, a lot of times we get society credit for it, but we run in campaign mode, so you can relax a lot of those things. You can relax all the races, all the non-society legal spells and feats and stuff you can use. And that's actually one of the things that kind of makes it more fun, I think, with an AP, is that it is a little bit looser in that regard as well, though. So.
Well, especially if you've done a lot of society play and you're very familiar with the restrictions, it's nice to be able to, now I can play this race that I otherwise, wouldn't be able to have access to. I can pick up a playtest class without having to run it within the strict confines of the playtest requirements in organized play. I can just kind of run and have fun with it and things like that.
Yeah. So, I think that's good. So good to know about that. Have you been doing other interviews as well, or has that just kind of been it for recently?
No, I've got that one. I had a very, very long time friend of mine that I had an interview with. He had it's actually kind of funny. It's my friend Jason Jones, and the interview that he does a lot of pop culture stuff, which occasionally touches on gaming, and he had me on. And that was really good because it came at the time he saw I was running my Kickstarter and wanted to help support that. So not only was it a good opportunity to catch up and talk about some of the very, very first campaigns we were in together, but also to work with that a little bit. Ironically, both of these two interviews, it happened to be the tech-savvy individual was gone that day. And so the co-host was having to sort of try to impromptu make it up as they went along. It'd be like you being gone on this show and me trying to run it. Oh wait, oh no, that's a tech hiccup. Hang on, everybody. Oh no, I guess this works out fine. Alrighty, hooray for accidents.
Yeah.
So
I think you would be okay. I mean, what we do here is actually pretty simple, the recording mechanism. So I think you could manage that okay.
All right, well, let's not test that, right? We've done 2 years without me having to test it. Let's go another 2 maybe before I have to.
All right. Well, this is in part why we're recording today, which is a Thursday instead of our normal Tuesday, so that we can get things done before I take a couple of days off. So not to, you could have brought in a co-host, but then you'd have to figure out all the tech on your own, I think.
Easier for me to just come on a few days early.
Yes.
So this will be, this is, by the time this comes out, what we're talking, our conversation here will be a week old.
Yes.
Right. So.
Wow. Well, we will have to kind of guess what people are talking about a week from now so that we can address it while we're talking today.
What are they going to be talking about? I've seen some of the other podcasts talking about, somebody's going to be talking about the Precog.
Yes.
And releasing that. And we've promised to talk about the Precog as well. We promised way before they promised to talk about it.
I know. Like a month ago. I mean, we knew, hey, people are going to be excited to hear about the Precog. And then sure enough, on Monday, I noticed that Alex and Vanessa and James were going to talk on No Direction Beyond. Yesterday, they had a stream all about the Precog, breaking down the class. And then I think that's going to come out on Friday, is when their YouTube will come out on that. So that'll be
that's when anybody could go see it.
Yeah. So that's going to be almost a whole week before people hear this. And because I was GMing a game last night, I have no idea what they talked about. So, yeah,
well, I can guarantee you what they didn't talk about
yeah,
was do Ron and John think it's interesting or do they think it's
yeah,
dumb? I mean, I remind
yeah,
you that when we did that, we talked about the
yeah.
evolutionist.
Yes.
And at the outset of that conversation, I thought the evolutionist was kind of dumb. But by the
Yeah.
time we got to the end of it, I saw a lot of really good opportunity, and I changed my mind around, and I thought the evolutionist actually was pretty cool.
Okay. All right. So, how should we start here? Oh, well, I'm going to have to say this, though. Having seen you play the precog in a couple of our Horizons of the Vast adventures now, meetings, I actually was surprised at how cool I thought it was. So, you'll have to tell me a little bit about how you find it starting at first level, the precog now.
Well, I think I think the precog. I initially thought it was really interesting
Yeah.
and worth giving a try to. I maintain that. My attitude hasn't changed. I still think a precog is really neat.
Yeah.
There are not the thing that's neat about the precog is that the mystic is the only kind of pure spellcaster that is
Right.
thrown into the game. I mean, there you can absolutely play. I mean, there okay. So there's the if you the problem the mystic is the one out of the base book, right?
Right. Okay.
Because there's just too much tech, right? And
Right.
there's an expectation that you'll have all kinds of computers and engineering expertise, which is super important expertise to have. Um, if you're playing sort of the a tech wizardy character is going to be emphasis on the tech. A mystic can be a real emphasis on just the spell casting, but mystics, because they're so good at healing, tend to be very healer focused when you play a
Yeah.
mystic. And I think even the Witch Warper carried a lot of really awesome thematic stuff with it, but that
Mm-hmm.
same thematic stuff doesn't it doesn't lean into, it kind of seems to lean away from some of the pure spellcasting. Whereas
Mm-hmm.
precog,
Mm-hmm.
on the other hand, seems to lean into pure spellcasting. And I really like that about it. There is no expectation on me to do anything except to be casting spells about stuff. And in
Yes.
fact,
Yes.
the way that I use my paradoxes, the way the class features is, they help you with spellcastery things like, oh, you need to overcome spell resistance. We can help you with that. You make caster level check. This is a thing that you can use it for, right? Be even more spellcastery than you were before.
Mm-hmm.
And so for
Mm-hmm.
somebody that's looking for a fairly dedicated spellcaster that isn't the healer, I feel like the precog is an excellent choice. That's how I feel. Its role has defined itself, and I've been able to play into that very, very solidly. Um, the thing that is really awkward about playing a precog in the specifically in the Horizons of the Vast is that we rarely do more than one encounter a day, and so
Right.
sort of the little ritual of, oh, I get up in the morning, I'm going to
Yeah.
pre-roll my 2 rolls, and then I'm going to utilize them for things, is always all right, well, 4 days later, you get, jumped by such and such monster. I'm like, I guess I better real quick roll my 2 dice and see
Right.
whether they're
Right.
going to
Right.
be any good, right? It's not really a pre-roll as much as it's sort of a beginning of combat, oh crap, I forgot about it, real quick roll.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, and to the extent we get into any lengthy exploration of a specific adventure site, that will absolutely change. And I know there is one of those coming up in book 1 here. So,
Yes. Yes.
but for now, when the more we're out doing some exploration, it feels like the pre-rolling isn't really built for that. It's built for more of a society play kind of thing, or a lengthy expedition, or a lengthy excursion into a single encounter location type of thing. Which isn't bad. It's just a thing to keep in mind for playing a precog. If somebody came to me and said, I'm interested in playing a spellcaster, is a precog going to be good? I would say, yes, it is. Maybe not for Horizons of the Vast,
Mm-hmm.
but
Well, one of the interesting things that changed from the pretest to the actual class coming out was the fact that the prime attribute was dexterity, still
mhm.
is, but the casting number, spells and all this stuff is still based on intelligence. does that hamper you at all, having to buff up your decks as a caster? I know it's useful a lot of ways, but would
Right.
you rather be able to do something else instead?
No, I feel like Dex matters. I as soon as I saw that the Precog playtest had Dex as its casting stat,
Yeah.
I thought, oh, okay, well, what's it really gonna be, right?
Yes.
I can understand that part of the point of
Yeah.
a playtest, and there's a lot more thought that goes into playtests, I think, than a lot of people assume. A lot
Mhm.
of the playtest classes are put together with intentionally off the wall things that we want to see people respond to, and with intentionally underpowered things that we want people to complain about. Right? No playtest class is given in a way that the designers feel is balanced right out of the gate. It is imbalanced, and it's often imbalanced in some contradictory ways because they want to get some specific data about the way the class plays. To be honest, I was pretty sure that the Vanguard wouldn't last as a Constitution based character, but it
Oh, that's
was.
great. Well,
Um,
they balanced that out by limiting when you could apply your strength to damage, though. So, it,
right, right.
yeah, yeah,
But I didn't think that Dex was ever going to be the precog's sort of primary ability score when it came out in the book. But dexterity is already everybody's most important attribute. I mean, even if you're somebody who ostensibly doesn't use it at all, you're a heavy armor wielding soldier, you're a Solarian who's got so many other things that are more important to be higher than dexterity, it's still the thing that builds up your armor class, that builds up your reflex save, that builds up some of your
right.
most important skills. So it's never a not important skill to have. I do feel like intelligence was the absolute right choice for precog, because a
Yes,
precog's theme is like knowing stuff ahead of time and getting glimpses of stuff, and that's always been kind of super thinky, right? In my way of thinking, I suppose you could probably spin it maybe kind of wise, that you're predicting based on kind of a sense motive sort of way, but it feels very thinky to me, that trope. And so intelligence feels right, and playing a precog with a high intelligence leans into the way that I feel like I enjoy playing a precog. So I feel like that works.
Mhm. Well, the other interesting thing about it, I noticed, having Dex is your key ability score, right? And on top of that, the weapon proficiencies are crazy good for a caster. You know?
Yeah, because they're customizable. They're not, but the output isn't necessarily good, but
Hmm.
the formation of them is very broad. So if you want to be a caster who can use a sniper rifle, oh, well, precog is a good way to go. But that same precog isn't going to be able to use a lot of other things. So,
Right,
I mean,
right, right.
you have to pick your advanced melee weapons or your long arm or your sniper. I mean, so it's always a way to make things just a little bit different. I feel like making that a specific choice that is independent of your focus is a
Hmm.
little bit interesting, because I could see folding those in together, right? If you are
Right, right, right.
somebody who is from a doomed future where everything is sort of hard scrabble and tough, maybe that means advanced melee weapons must be the thing you pick, right? Whereas if you're kind of a prognosticator sort, maybe sniper rifle fits with that. They didn't go that way. They let you pick.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
the having played an envoy for so many levels, where I realized long arms were so important, and actually going out of my way to take weapon proficiency long arm, I decided to start with long arm for my precog as well.
Right, right. And I actually like having a long arm as a caster. I have a couple other characters and an envoy that has a long arm specialization, primarily because you can do some damage when you're out of spells, and that's probably the biggest thing I don't like about having an adventure where you're spending an inordinate amount of time in there and you can't rest. That you use up all your good spells at lower levels anyway. Higher levels, you get a chance to get some spells that you can use all the time. But lower levels, it's like, oh, I'm out of spells. That's it. I plink away at my small arm. So having some other options, I think, is really nice.
Yeah, I think my preferred option is the scaling cantrips variant from Galactic
Yes,
Magic.
Yes.
Because
Yes.
that means I'm not going to have to be relying on a small. I think my long arm will ultimately be better if I
Yeah.
keep a level appropriate long arm. But it sure is nice to know that I'm never going to be in a situation where the answer is no. There really isn't anything you can do.
Right. Yeah. I forget. Again, we're not in society play, and we have allowed that. You're the only caster in our group, though. Is that right?
I am.
Yeah. Wow. I think
Yeah,
that's
because
right.
soldier, biohacker,
Yeah.
vanguard, um, op,
Mechanic?
operative, no
Op
mechanic, and then
a nanosite.
a nanosite. That's right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
The frontliner is a nanosite. Yeah. Because the soldier is the archer.
right.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so you picked Doomed Future, is that right? As your anchor?
Well, I did, and that was actually just because I know enough about the overall campaign to know that there is doom coming.
Oh.
And
Oh.
so
Yeah.
that was just so I can play into the fact that I can be like, everything is going to be awful. But all life on this planet is doomed. Doomed, do you hear?
Yeah.
Um, so that's why I picked that one, primarily because I thought that would be kind of fun to role play, and it was kind of a
Mhm.
neat in-game way to sort of mask a little bit of out-of-game knowledge that I have, without being
Right.
able to give any sort of specifics about. Well, I mean, though, the extent of the specifics I have could be summed up in a sentence or two, but that's a pretty spoilery sentence or two, so I'm not going to say it. Even knowing just that, I'm like, oh well, that solves a lot of the
Right.
mystery, and is a good enough reason for somebody who has seen that to be, oh nope, things are super doomed.
Mhm. Yeah, I noticed with the anchors that they're real similar to the Vanguard aspects in that
Hmm.
you kind of have an early one that helps you with some things, then a kind of a middle one and kind of a later one. Um, so it's kind of neat. It looks like the precog model in that regard is real similar to how they kind of built out the Vanguard, which I think is a really neat system for doing it.
Well, and then one of the ways that that is particularly interesting is because most campaigns you have a good sense of where you're going to be landing, right? Oh, we're playing an adventure path. We know 1 through 13, right?
Hmm.
Or, oh, we're doing devastation arc. We know we're going to be, high level. So
Right.
you can either omit the ones that are like, 14th level. Oh, my 14th level ability isn't going to matter, right?
Right.
Or, oh, if we're going to be going a long campaign, my middle ability, the ninth-ish level one, is going to matter kind of a whole lot. So
Hmm.
maybe I ought to pick one of those that's good. Or if it's one of the things where you're like, well, we get together whenever and our campaigns never go very long, maybe I ought to focus on the very first one.
Hmm.
I Part of the advantage I picked with Doomed Future is that each of them lets you apply your paradox to something else. And I didn't feel like being able to apply to more skills was necessarily very helpful, and that's what the
Hmm.
other options are. Um, but being able to apply to fortitude saves feels very useful, and
Hmm.
so it
Hmm.
happens that Doomed Future also has that kind of mechanical lift to it that I very much like. Being able to apply that to a fortitude save.
Yeah. Well, and it looks like from what I've seen so far in game that your character actually does some decent damage with spells already at first level.
That's yes, and that's been the case primarily because the damage I do is always going to seem higher
Hmm.
because the damage I say is success. That is
Right.
to say, if I'm saying, oh, this is going to do 9 points, make a fortitude save for half, in your mind, you're like, oh, that's a 9 point attack. Well, I
Right.
mean,
Right.
maybe
Right.
it's
Right.
only a 4 point attack.
Hmm.
Um, so that's that's, but yes, it's nice to be able to consistently play with that. I feel like the precog spells have a lot of good thematic
Hmm.
application too. My two main first level spells have been the one that pushes somebody to the towards the end of their natural life, so they take a bunch of
Right.
damage,
Yeah.
or the blessing of youth, the one that pushes your allies back towards when they were healthier, and that
Hmm.
restores stamina. So
Hmm.
I think those are thematically really neat. Injury Echo, the basic cantrip, is also fun.
Right. Right. Yeah. Injury Echo. That's the one that you've been using quite a bit. So
Hmm.
it seems pretty helpful. Yeah. I don't think you've used the stamina one yet in game. I didn't even realize you had that.
I haven't had to. I haven't.
Right.
I keep it available, right? And I'm
Right.
excited to use it if somebody needs it. Um, but anytime you've got anytime you're a character who can heal stamina, I think this applies mostly to envoys, but also to this kind of precog. If you've got party members who are low on stamina, then your calculus when it gets to be your turn in combat is, do I help them restore some of the stamina, or are we near enough to the end of this fight that my best action is to help end the fight very quickly?
Right.
And especially in my case where it's, well, I could either do some good damage to the enemy or heal your stamina back. Sometimes the situation is, well, maybe I just do more damage to the enemy and then we call the fight over, and then they can heal their own stamina with a resolve point.
Yeah, for a long, drawn-out fight, though, it's helpful to have that stamina replenishment.
Oh, yeah.
How does that scale? How much stamina replenishment can you do, and how does that scale as you level? Do you know?
I am worried that if I talk about it, I'm going to be keeping in mind the damage doing one, which I'm more excited about.
Oh.
I've used it more, right? That's the one that does I think it's 1d10, 3d10, 6d10 or something that's particularly big like that. But even the one that's the Blessing of Youth is pretty good. I think that's d8s, I want to say. And it is, it's 1d8, 3d8, 5d8, 7d8. So as you go up first, second, third, fourth, et cetera, et cetera. It also makes people move a little bit faster, which is kind of fun. That's a sort of a little boost that kind of says youth. But the one that pushes people, death's door, that pushes people to the end of their life, is 1d10, 2d10, 4d10, 6d10, etc. And it also does strength and dexterity damage, which is kind of an extra little rider. I feel like Starfinder doesn't do very much with ability score damage, even though it's part of the rules. And in fact, there was I was working on a project with a friend of mine that I think never actually got to publication for a third-party press. But one of the things he was saying is, we could do a bunch of these rules that talk about taking ability score damage. And I'm like, but there's no ability score damage in Starfinder. He's like, but there is. And I looked, I'm like, oh my goodness, you're right. It just doesn't come up very often, right? Radioactivity brings it up, but...
Well, we've seen it. We saw that in Dead Suns, some ability score damage, I think. And I think one of the issues with it is it's really hard to get rid of. At the level that you can get it, it's really difficult to get rid of, especially because you need a higher level mystic in order to remove it than typically you'll have in party. So I think that's kind of the issue that I seem to recall with it. In society play, you can always get it taken care of out of game, right, in between missions and stuff. But during an AP, it seems quite a bit more challenging.
Yeah, it might be that it's rare because it's so punitive.
Right. So what is your favorite thing about the precog so far then?
Oh gosh. From a mechanical perspective, I do really like the pre-rolling. I feel like that's kind of fun. It's not, and in play, I've seen that as not so much, here's how I'm going to ensure a success. It's, here's how I'm going to mitigate against some abject failure, right? If you knew you could take an 8 on a fortitude save, right, and maybe that's going to do it for you. You don't need to worry about rolling a 1 or 2 because you always got that 8 right there. That's going to be the case when we get into where at higher levels where your paradox can be used for more things, like an initiative roll or something like that.
Right.
I don't think that it's ever going to be a situation where I'm like, let me use my paradox so my initiative can be very, very first. It's well, let me use it so I'm not last, and maybe I can get in an attack before a slow enemy goes. So I really think that from a mechanical perspective, I think that's really interesting. From a role-playing perspective, the thing that I like is sort of the oracle nature of it, right? No matter what kind of precog you play, whether you are, cast drift in time or, chronomancer type thing or something like that. The whole point of playing a precog is I know things that are going to be coming. And that's a really fun role-playing hook. It's a hard role-playing hook to make work well in a lot of role-playing games because the player having no knowledge of what's coming up is pretty critical to the way the game is played. So being able to play a character that does know some of that stuff is really kind of neat. It's a hard line to walk. But I feel like the precog does very well with it, and I've enjoyed that kind of thing. Oh, I've got a bad feeling about this. This is going to be a terrible idea. We're going to have doom on all of us. That kind of thing is how I've decided to spin it with my character. And you can easily see a precog that does it the other way, right? That's going all Doctor Strange, looking through the million futures all at once and things like that. That's kind of a fun. It's a really fun role-playing hook. So that's my favorite sort of mechanical or non-mechanical thing about it.
Well, I agree. I think I'd like to see you do that a lot more in game. I think that'll be a lot of fun, especially when people start making plans to do things. Oh yeah, we should, because a lot of times we're strategizing and doing stuff. The players are. I'd like for you to just come out and say, "Oh no, that'll never work. We're doomed."
Terrible idea. Doom, nothing lies that way but doom. It's like trying to think that something is outside the scope of the adventure for organized play. No, that means it's wrong. We must not go that way.
Yeah, so that's really good. Yeah, I haven't made many casters. I'm not a huge caster, as you've probably seen in the games that we've played in. I almost always play a non-caster type. And I've thought I do have some. I have a 12th level mystic. I have a 5th level technomancer or 3rd level witch warper. But I haven't. A lot of those are GM credits, right? So I played them once in a while, but I haven't played them all
the way up.
Yeah. But I think what you're saying in terms of the role play value of the precog actually makes it really appealing. I think. Because that's what I've been getting into. Like I've made a new mystic now that's just it's an SRO, so it's just all completely just playing up the fact that it's a mechanical thing and it's trying to heal all these fleshy bodies around, and why do you keep falling apart and stuff, and that's all I do. It's just, and I try to the entire 4-hour scenario completely stay in character with my mechanical voice. And I'm sure
that's
the players,
funny.
I think the players find it very irritating, but I do it mostly with a local group, and after 3 or 4 sessions, they've realized that's what I'm going to do, and they get by with it. But no, but I think with a precog, I'm always looking for something kind of cool and fun to do, because I got so many characters to play, and it's like I want to do something different. I want to do something fun while I'm playing. I'm not really worried about the actual what I'm accomplishing. It's more, am I having fun while I'm doing it? And I think the precog actually sounds precisely up that alley.
Yeah, I think, give it a try. I think that it's an awful lot of fun. I would encourage anybody that is interested in trying out a spellcaster in Starfinder to give the precog a whirl. Now, if you're the sort of person who, when you play a spellcaster, likes to be the person everybody can count on to heal you, I don't know, maybe still play a precog, because the Blessing of Youth, it's got some opportunities in that regard. So,
yeah, if that were a cantrip, that would be a little bit better, because you're going to run out of spells pretty quick if you're constantly healing stamina, I would imagine, though.
Well, yeah, but let's go back to what you were talking about, where they can actually have a weapon loadout that makes it, even if they run out of their spells doing that, they still can contribute pretty effectively in a combat. I think that's true.
Yeah, especially with Dex being their key stat, So it's like, well, I'll load up on that, and I'll be really good at shooting things, and I'll be able to have some additional insights I have and do some healing. And like with our group, I mean, basically we have you, and then our biohacker has some capability down the road to heal stamina. And that's it. That's all the healing we have among 6 players. So,
right. But we also have an opportunity right now to be, we've gotten in some trouble. Well, we just leave, right? We go 12 miles away. Now we're in another hex, and we have nothing to fear.
Well, eventually there's going to be some sort of dungeon kind of thing, and you might not be able to do that.
And then our poor planning will come back to haunt us, and there I'll be, I told you so. I told you all so.
Yeah, everybody will start taking a level of envoy or mystic or something,
something to bring some of it back.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's exciting. I think our take on the precog is probably going to be a lot different than what they did in No Direction Beyond, but I think I think it sounds like a really fun class. And I'll be honest, I wasn't terribly interested in it until you started playing it. And even then it's like, well, I need to learn something about it. But now my brain's working and thinking, yeah, this could be a lot of fun. This could be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I do like it. One of the things I'd like to do is, if I could predict the future a little bit,
Yeah.
is that in a couple months we come back to it, right? When I've got a
Yeah.
precog that's 7th, 8th, ninth level, presuming survival that long, right? then I might have a lot more to say about what a
Yeah.
precog does at sort of the mid level as
Yeah.
well. So
I predict that we will do that.
alrighty, that's your precog as well then.
All right. Well, I'm John.
And I'm Ron, and this is Digital Divination.